My first question is, of course, how concerned are you about this final pullout of US forces and the situation that they're leaving behind, of course, in Afghanistan?
Of course, very concerned, as all Afghans are today. And we have to remind everyone that the evacuations can't stop with the chaos that we saw at Kabul airport. So President Macron and other governments are now trying to negotiate safe access for Afghans to be able to continue to leave, Afghans in danger. We need to ensure that such a sensitive operation can happen in safety so that those who are still on the lists, Afghans at risk, who are still on the lists to be evacuated to France, Italy, UK, and the US can still leave the country safely. The Taliban have publicly announced that they would allow for that if Afghans have proper travel authorizations. Now, what we need to remind everyone is that most Afghans don't have passports. So what we need to see is a concerted effort that we didn't see at the Kabul airport between, for example, European governments to provide travel authorizations, invitation letters to these Afghans. Some of them are students who are accepted in universities in Europe. Some of them are musicians and artists who we know have been targeted. They've been targeted killings of musicians and comedians in the past 2 weeks. And also researchers, professors, intellectuals, members of civil society who have their visas approved but can't leave the country at the moment. So we need to support them. And this is really the first immediate step of the negotiation that is happening and that needs to continue.
Just on that point, do we have a clear idea of the numbers of people, foreigners and Afghan nationals, that are still waiting around Kabul, around the airport to leave?
Now they're waiting at home, and they're waiting at home. There are thousands still on the list, again, approved to leave. So we need to focus on them in the first place. But then negotiations will need to continue beyond this population at under immediate risk, to also think about the women, the children left behind. So initially, the Taliban said that they would allow everyone to work. But recently, they've told women to stay at home, not to report to work. They're doing so only in a few sectors, for example, in the health sector. So most women right now are not allowed to work, and we see it already. We also saw on Sunday, there was a very large meeting of the Ministry of Higher Education in a hall with hundreds and hundreds of men, but not one single woman. Before, that hall would have been filled 50% with women, also because the international community was there. So what we need to make sure is that that the UN keeps monitoring missions, a presence in Afghanistan, so that we keep monitoring the rights of women and children and youth left behind.
Now, following this pullout of US forces, the Taliban has already been speaking of independence, great independence. In your own opinion, what does the future look like in Afghanistan under the insurgents' rule?
Well, first of all, they speak of independence, but 75% of the Afghan economy, more or less, is supported by international aid. So the economy, and a former UN official was saying it, could collapse within weeks. Why? Because the IMF is withholding funds, because the US government is also withholding freezing access to the central bank reserves in Washington. So what we need is to be very careful. Negotiations can continue. Financial support should continue, and that doesn't mean recognizing the Taliban. It just means not putting the Afghan population under very strict economic conditions. We cannot have sanctions the way, for example, the US has done in Iran. It will just end up hurting the Afghan population more. Right now, Afghans don't have access to their salaries. There are hours of lines to withdraw money, and only very limited amounts from ATM machines. There's panic. There's inflation. 20% of basic food costs have risen by 20%. So we need to make sure that we can, first of all, support the Afghan economy, free up all these freezing of resources. Russia asked for it as well. We need to make sure that we do that. Otherwise, the health sector will crumble, the education sector will crumble, and institutions won't be there to govern the 40 million people. Then we need to ensure that there's enough access for humanitarian agencies on the ground, and make that access, again, conditional to the fact that we need to monitor what happens on the ground. And third, we need to have more coordination among foreign governments, among donors, to make sure that the UN assistance mission to Afghanistan is rethought, reinforced, but also to ensure that there's a common response for the future of the Afghan people.
Okay, Nassim Majidi from the Samuel Hall Research Centre. That's all we have time for. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.